So, it's your fantasy draft. You're on the clock. There's a lot of players to choose from. What do you do? What is going on, YouTube Fantasy Headliners? Back at you for episode number 2.
Yep.
How we doing today, Mac?
Man, everything's everything.
That's what I'm talking about. We got a lot to cover. Short amount of time.
Let's do it.
What we're going to hit on today is players with the same ADP. Mm-hmm. Somebody you may have to choose between in a draft. You may have to pick one or the other.
Right.
They may be similar style players or not, but we're going to go ahead and discuss it right now. First one we got here on the list, Ajayi and Demarco Murray.
Well, both of these guys, I like bell cows, bell cow running backs, people who are not going to give up a lot of carries, a lot of touches to anybody. And with these two in particular, Ajayi for me is a better play. Reason being because he doesn't have a young stud in the back like Demarco Murray with Henry. Henry, as the season progressed, last year, he started to get more and more carries. And I don't know if it was mainly due to Demarco being injured. He had a lot of injuries last year, stuff like that. That could come into play. But again, with Ajayi, you don't have to worry about that. So for me, if I had to pick between these two, especially with reports in camp saying that Ajayi is going to get like 300 plus carries, that's crazy. That's probably, I don't know, about 50 more than what David Johnson had this past year. So that's a big number. But if he does it, Pouncey's back, Pouncey's healthy. He's got weapons around him. Kenny Stills, you got Devontae Parker, Landry, So I think that offense is going to be a lot smoother. DeMarco's got a lot of weapons as well. But again, like I said, if you choose him, you're going to have to get Henry early. So I don't know if I want to take another roster spot up just to have a handcuff, where I can go and get another value player.
Yeah, and that makes sense, absolutely. But let me tell you why I like DeMarco Murray. He's done it before. Mm-hmm. Ajayi may have been a flash in the pan. He may have been a one-hit wonder. I haven't seen enough. I like Ajayi. I like the way he runs, but he's so dependent on his offensive line that Ajayi may get 200 yards one week. Some of that offensive line goes down, and he's back to getting 30 yards.
Right.
He just hasn't proven that he can produce regardless. DeMarco Murray produced in Dallas. He didn't get a chance to produce in Philly. They had no idea how to use him. And now that he's been in Tennessee last year, great season again. Yes, you're right. You're going to have to take Derrick Henry early. Mm-hmm. The way I look at that, though, is regardless, if you draft Henry and Murray goes out at any point throughout the year, it's plug and play. You know, that Derrick Henry now all of a sudden becomes an RB1. So, yeah, you have to get both of them, but you kind of treat them both as an RB1. Like I said, DeMarco's proved himself before. He's a hard runner. He gets the extra yards. He can catch passes. He's handled a big workload before. And plus, the way I look at Henry, too, is this old man don't want to lose his job to a young kid. It's motivation. Right. He's got a reason. He's got somebody pushing him. I can see Jay kind of slacking off a little bit because there is nobody. Damian Williams is back there stealing touchdowns every once in a while. I mean, but other than that, it's Ajayi.
Yeah.
And I can't see DeMarco Murray just handing it over to the young kid.
No, I mean, and that's a great point. But, I think the other thing that kind of worries me in that aspect, just like you said, the old man is, looking over his shoulder a lot because he is just that, in running back standards. I think he's like 32, 33 years old. And he's had so much wear and tear throughout the course of his career. So I think that's another reason why they're, trying to bring Henry along, a little bit faster than probably expected. So, again, for me, both are great backs, but I can't see, using that early pick just to get Henry, just to have him sitting on the bench. You know what I mean? And just wasting a spot, in all reality, just for the fact of if something does happen to DeMarco,
Yep, absolutely. I can get that argument. If you go another round or two down, probably end of second, beginning of the third, possibly even the fourth, depending on the members of your draft. Mm-hmm. You got two wide receivers who are somewhat similar.
Right.
You got Demaryius Thomas and Sammy Watkins.
Yeah.
I mean, I do. I like both of them. But if I had to choose, I'm going Demaryius Thomas all day long.
Right.
He's consistent. Yes, he has, between the two of them, the worst quarterback situation. Simeon has not proven himself. Paxton Lynch hasn't proven himself. But, Demaryius still produced 1,000 yards last year.
Oh, yeah.
Despite that. And now they have another year worth of working together. I mean, if the floor for Demaryius Thomas is 1,000 yards and 6-7 touchdowns, I'll take it. Sammy Watkins has the potential to get you 15, 16, 1,700 yards. But he can't stay healthy for anything. I mean, I think his foot is put together with purple now and laters and a couple rubber bands.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't matter what happens. The guy can just walk off the bench and something happens with his foot. Yeah. And as a receiver, as much as he's cutting and moving and coming off of his routes, I don't trust his foot.
No, I mean, and that's a great point. And I see what you're saying. I think the only thing with, like you said, Demaryius, you don't know what you're going to get with the quarterback situation. With Sammy, and again, that's a big if. If he is healthy, he has the potential to become one of those elite wide receivers. You can put his name in the same breath as a Julio, Odell, even Antonio Brown. I know that's kind of a different stratosphere, but I think he's got the potential. He's young, you know what I mean? And if you think about it, Julio's had the same type of surgery. You know what I'm saying? So it's been other guys who've had this and went through this type of injury that's rebounded and done exceptionally well. So I think Sammy, has a potential, and his ceiling is so high. I mean, this guy is, like you said previously, he could have 1,500 yards. With that offense, you got Shady doing his thing, Tyrod. They got the kid Zay Jones that they drafted, but that's who else are they gonna? They don't have anybody else to throw it to. You know what I'm saying? So Sammy's gonna get more targets, I think. Thrown his way versus Demaryius. Because Demaryius still has Emmanuel Sanders there. So for me, I think Sammy's a better value.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I do. I like Sammy, but here's the thing with Sammy. I don't want Sammy unless he's my number 2.
Right.
If I have a solid number 1 ahead of him or a stud wide receiver 1, then yeah, I'll take a chance on Sammy. But if I'm relying on him to be my number 1, I'll have to pass.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, in that same vein, in that same, scenario we're talking about, people at later ADPs, I'm looking at 2 guys. They're roughly going around about the same, time frame as Slick Willie Snead and Desean Jackson. I like both these guys, but for me, I'm pushing more towards Willie Snead. Reason being, Brandon Cooks is left a void. About 120 targets are gone. The rookie, which is a sophomore now, Michael Thomas, he was phenomenal last year. He did really well. They did pick up Ted Ginn, but Ted Ginn is not a target hog.
All Ted Ginn does is either catch touchdowns or drop passes.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no in between.
You know what I mean? So, and it wasn't the fact that he didn't have a great quarterback. Cam is a good quarterback. You know what I'm saying? He can throw the ball. He's got a huge arm. But, you come into an offense with Drew Brees, who's going to throw the ball and throw that ball. You know what I'm saying? I know they have a lot of running backs. They got a couple of new additions with Adrian Peterson. But Willie Snead he's gonna soak up those targets that Brandon Cooks left. And I think Desean is more, I don't want to say a gimmicky player, but he's more that type where it's like a long ball. You know what I'm saying? He runs great deep routes. But I trust Breeze more than I do Jameis. Just to be, blunt about it. So I think Willie has a potential to become a wide receiver 2 versus Desean is more of a flex play. So if I had to choose between the 2, I'm going with Willie Snead just for those factors.
Right, and this is why I'm going to Desean Jackson. I mean, I know it sounds kind of funny that we're always going opposite of each other, but it's the way it works out. Desean Jackson has always been a stud. He's had injury concerns the past few years, but going back to his Eagles days, and he showed flashes of it in Washington. he has all the potential to be a wide receiver one, elite talent, elite speed, but he's always been the wide receiver one.
Mm-hmm.
He's always had the other team's top DB on him.
Right.
He's always had to deal with that his entire career, and he's still produced. Now he's getting to the point to where he's wide receiver number 2 behind Mike Evans.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting a lesser opponent. Not that there's that huge of a difference between their DB 1s and 2s, but he's no longer getting that shutdown corner. Very few teams have 2 shutdown corners. And if they have one, it's going on Evans.
Yeah.
So Jackson's going to get the lesser of the 2 opponents. And with the talent that he has and the potential that he has, I don't need Desean Jackson to go out and catch me 100 balls.
Yeah.
Desean Jackson can go out every week and catch me 1 ball for 50 yards and a touchdown, and I'm going to be happy. So that's going to be 11. That's 11 fantasy points right there.
Yeah.
He's going to have big games. He's going to have small games. He's not ever going to be the type of guy to go out there and catch 120 passes. I don't think he's going to get a huge number of targets. But the thing with Jackson is he doesn't need that many targets in order to produce.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that late in the draft, that home run ability, I mean, I know you mentioned him as a flex. Yes, he starts the season as a flex with the ability to go into a wide receiver too.
Yeah. I mean, I can agree with that. I mean, like I said, I think Desean, he's proven in the past. Last year in Washington, it wasn't a stellar year, but like you said, previous year, when he was an Eagle, he was great. You know what I'm saying? And I think he can repeat that performance. But it's just I'm just leery about that whole offense. It's so many different targets that they have, so many different weapons. You got the stud OJ Howard. This kid's gonna be great. You know what I'm saying? Cameron Brate. And then again Mike Evans. Mike Evans is demanding a lot of targets. So just like I said, between the 2 of them, you sitting there maybe around 8th, 9th round. I think Willie has just got a bigger ceiling for me, for my taste.
Yeah, and that's understandable. I think you'd be happy with either player. You go even farther down the list. We're talking 8th, 9th, possibly even the 10th round. There's a couple wide receivers that are in the same area that, in my opinion, are way too low down the draft board. You got Cameron Meredith of Chicago, and you got Mike Wallace of the Ravens.
Mm-hmm.
My choice, I'm taking Mike Wallace hands down. You talk about all the people that have left Buffalo: Steve Smith, Kamar Aiken, Dennis Pitta. I mean, that's over 200 targets that are gone.
Right.
Yes, now they now have Jeremy Maclin and they have Danny Woodhead, but Mike Wallace is the only person in Baltimore that has any rapport with Joe Flacco.
That's true.
You got the number 1 throwing team in the NFL as far as attempts go, and you only got 1 wide receiver with any, past knowledge of the playbook, past rapport with the quarterback. Anytime Flacco's in trouble, he's going to be looking for Wallace. Wallace is going to get the chance on the deep balls. He's going to get the crossing balls across the field. Macklin's going to be used, and he's going to absorb a lot of targets, but Wallace has that speed kind of like Desean Jackson. He doesn't need to catch 10 balls for 150 yards.
Mm-hmm.
I need Wallace, as far as fantasy goes, to catch me 4 balls for 90 yards and a touchdown, and I'm happy. So that's why I'm taking Wallace. That type of potential that late in the draft, I'll take it all day long.
And, I see your point when it comes to that. I think with my mentality when I'm picking late in the draft, especially looking for wide receivers, again, like I said, I'm looking for, a huge ceiling. And Cam Meredith, he's really got the potential to be a wide receiver 1. It depends on how that quarterback situation all shakes out. You know what I'm saying? But if they can get decent play, maybe whether if it's out of Trubisky or whatever, Cam is the type of wide receiver, he can go get the deep ball. He's a huge red zone target. You know what I mean? 6'4", 230 pounds. I mean, he's a big wide receiver. So I can see, and you still got the kid Jordan Howard. I mean, he's running that ball. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So when they get down to the goal line, he's a big target. And I think with Mike Wallace, like you said, you mentioned before, it's so many different targets that are out there. Jeremy Maclin, I think I'm a little higher on him than you are. I think last year, and he's came out and stated that, he had a groin injury, so he was already, he was hurt. Jeremy Maclin is a great wide receiver. Mike Wallace, he's kind of bit me in the past, being a Steelers fan, When he played with us, he did well, but he didn't live up to his potential, even with Miami. And he's done mediocre in Baltimore. So I'm just looking for, high upside. And I think Cam is probably the better choice for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the ADP that they're at right now, there's no reason why you end up with either one of those guys in those rounds. More than likely, they're going to be your bench wide receiver.
Oh, yeah.
Something you're not relying on week one. And they both have the potential, I think, to fill that need, though, if you have an injury later on in the season. Perfect plug-and-play option.
Mm-hmm.
So we've covered a bunch of wide receivers here, talked about a couple of running backs. At the beginning of every draft season, I mean, I've already seen it on all the other websites. Do I go 0 RB? Do I go 0 wide receiver? Should I take a quarterback early? I mean, all these questions are asked, and every year is a different answer.
Right.
Some year it's deep on running back. Some year it's deep on wide receiver. I think in both of our opinions this year, you need to get your running backs early. Yeah. There's plenty of wide receivers out there. There's tons of wide receivers. We just covered, in the past two sets, Desean Jackson, Willie Snead, Cam Meredith, and Mike Wallace. Mm-hmm. All those guys are going in late rounds, and I would take any one of those guys as my wide receivers. Mm-hmm. So I know one thing we wanted to give out there to everybody is we did a 0 wide receiver mock draft.
Yeah.
Try to find, the best possible team going heavy RB. We want to share with you guys the results of the draft. We'll be doing the same thing and go 0 RB so you can compare the two. But, yeah, I mean, as far as we're both concerned, 0 wide receiver, loading up on running backs is the way to go.
Well, and one key that you have to remember when you're doing a 0 wide receiver strategy, you have to be very disciplined and fight the temptation. For myself, other people may do it differently, but for myself, when I'm doing it, I like to go at least 4 rounds, just straight RBs. That's kind of hard to do when you're sitting there and you're seeing guys go by that you're like, oh my gosh, this dude is a stud, but I'm passing on him, to go to an RB. Now, also, I want to note, my philosophy when I'm looking at the strategy, I'm looking for bell cows or the closest thing to it. I mean, now in the NFL, bell cows are really thinning out. So I'm looking at people who don't really share the ball. You don't have to worry about touches or anybody, looking over the shoulder or anything like that. These guys are going to get you 15 to 20 touches a game. So when I did it, I did it with started at the 5th pick in the standard snake draft. The first 4 rounds, I got Shady McCoy first, Ajayi, Isaiah Crowell, Eddie Lacy. Now, I just want to touch on Crow. A lot of people hadn't been talking about him lately, but I'm telling you, this kid has the potential to be a top 5 back this year. And
you got him as a flex right now.
Exactly. And they beefed up the offensive line. So, I mean, I've got Shady at this situation. I got Shady and Jay. Those are RB1s. Mm-hmm. So you got 2 RB1s sitting there, another RB1 potentially as your flex, and then you got Eddie Lacy on the bench. So just hypothetically, if Eddie Lacy plays out and he becomes Eddie Lacy of 2 years ago, you got 4 RB1s sitting there. So you got the potential to either keep one, you know what I'm saying, or you could trade for a wide receiver one, because there's somebody out there who's going to go the opposite of this strategy, and they're going to have they're going to have RBs like
they have Amir Abdullah as their RB1 or 2.
Exactly. Ty Montgomery, somebody like that. So it's really trade bait.
Yep. And I know a lot of people, I'm sure we'll get some comments either on Facebook or Twitter or through this video, but a lot of people are thinking, Mac, why are you going to take somebody for your bench in the 4th round when there's probably people that are that are available that are better suited for that spot? And I think you hit it right on the head when you said that you got trade bait for later. A lot of people don't think about that kind of stuff. If you believe, like we do, that this is the year to grab running backs and grab them early because they're not going to last, make sure if you get that one extra, don't fall in love with him.
Right.
I mean, this needs to be a guy that you're going to be willing to dump at the drop of a hat. The second he plays out, the second he has 2 or 3 good weeks, you're shopping him, and you're shopping him hard for a wide receiver.
Yes.
You're not sitting there, oh, well, maybe I'll hang on to him. You don't need him. You got 3 other guys already.
Yeah.
Don't, try to be greedy with that 4th one. Go get something for him because that's your original strategy. It's just like being disciplined and taking 4 of them, right there off the bat.
Yeah.
Be disciplined and trading them away too. If he doesn't pan out, if Eddie Lacy comes out and is the same old Eddie Lacy who runs 2 yards into the back of his offensive line and falls over.
Yeah.
It is what it is. I mean, you tried. It's like gambling.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it's going to work out. Sometimes it's not. Like buying a lottery ticket or a scratcher. You're going to win sometimes.
Yes.
You're going to lose sometimes. If it doesn't work out, don't worry about it. Cut him, trade him, do whatever you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
By that time, every year there's somebody. Odell Beckham wasn't an early draft his rookie year. He didn't even play the first 3 or 4 games. Michael Thomas last year. David Johnson 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
All these people pop up throughout the season. And if Eddie Lacy's on your bench and he doesn't pan out, you're looking for one of those guys that are a breakout.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, like I said, the talent pool, it thins out as you get in later rounds, especially with RBs. It's so many that are injury prone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good. It's really good to be able to load up on as many studs or potential studs as possible, just in the event of something happening. So in the furtherance of the draft, after my 4th pick, that was the 5th round is when I got my first wide receiver. And at that point, Emmanuel Sanders was sitting there, and he was the best one available. So from this point on, you're really looking for your values, your best player, whether if it's wide receivers, tight ends, whatever you see that is probably the best player available is what you're going to go with, and upside. So I took Emmanuel Sanders, Brandon Marshall, Corey Davis at round 7, which I'm really high on him.
And Brandon Marshall, that goes back to the whole Deshaun Jackson conversation. He's
Yes.
always been the number 1. He's never been the number 2. He's the number 2 now. There's a lot of people down on Brandon Marshall. Oh, he's older now. I think he's 34 years old this year.
Mm-hmm.
He's slower. He can't do it anymore. Listen, the guy's going to give it everything he has, and that's all you can ask for. Is he going to be the Brandon Marshall of 3-4 years ago? No.
Right.
But he's got the number 2 DB on him, plenty of potential, huge red zone threat.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And like I said, anything from round 7 on down, you're looking for upside. So Cam Meredith, somebody we talked about before, he's got so much potential. Kenny Britt, this is a guy that a lot of people are not talking about. Really, really high on him. I mean, you look at it, what he did in he had Jared Goff as his quarterback, and he had 1,000 yards.
Yeah, I think Jared Goff only threw for like 1,200 all year. I mean, he had a horrible year, probably one of the worst years of a rookie quarterback in a long time. He didn't even start the beginning of the season, and I mean, you could just tell he was lost. Yeah, and if Kenny Britt still got 1,000 yards,
he threw 1,000 to Kenny and 200 to Jeff Fisher. So I mean, you know what I mean. So I really like him. He could turn out to be the number 1 wide receiver in, Cleveland. Corey Coleman, I like this kid, but he's injury prone, and he's starting to pick up a lot of injuries, these soft tissue injuries. Kind of remind you of Devontae Parker a couple of years ago, or last year actually. So I don't know. I want to stay away from him. Round 10 is normally where I look for my quarterbacks. I picked Eli Manning. I think he's going to have a huge year. All these weapons. You got the aforementioned Brandon Marshall, Odell, of course. So he's a good value right there.
Yeah, and here's one thing I want to bring up about that too that people may not pay attention to. Something I know that we always follow is you drafted Brandon Marshall as one of your wide receivers, and then you paired him up with Eli Manning. A lot of people kind of forget that when you can make a pair like that, whether it's Eli and Odell or Eli and Brandon or whoever, you're getting double points on touchdown plays, long yardage plays.
Yeah.
I mean, you're doubling up. If you can get a solid wide receiver and pair him with his quarterback, who is already somebody who's going to throw a lot, I mean, that's bonus points.
Yeah. Yeah, you're doubling up, really. And that's the way to go. Anytime you can do it. Sometimes you're not going to be able to get those big names.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to get Aaron Rodgers and Jordy Nelson more
exactly.
More likely than that.
So, but and to finish it out, I got ended up getting my tight end after that. Got Hunter Henry. He's got so much upside, in that offense. Phillip Rivers loves to throw the ball. Hunter Henry's a huge red zone target. Josh Doxson, he looks good in Washington. With Pryor there, Reed, Crowder, but Doxson was hurt last year, but he had so much potential, and the coaches really like his work ethic.
Yeah,
so
and he's a big receiver. He's going to be able to take that outside spot that Pierre had.
Exactly.
And now Crowder's going to be able to shift back into the slot where he belongs. Crowder's too small to be on the outside consistently. Yeah, he can line up out there every once in a while, but Doxson's a bigger guy. Great hands, good speed.
Mm-hmm.
I think he went to TCU.
Yeah.
He came out of college very highly touted. So, I mean, he has all the potential right there. That's somebody right there that you picked in one of the last rounds that could pan out being somebody you put in your lineup by week 6, 7, or 8.
Could be a league winner.
Mm-hmm.
And to finish it out, I had Dion Lewis and Quincy Enunwa. Dion Lewis was a shot in the dark, but just like you said, it could be one of those situations where it could pan out. We don't know what the running back situation is going to
nobody knows.
I
don't think Belichick knows. I think he just flips a coin or rolls a dice or something and just picks one.
Exactly. So, I mean, if you go back to his Dion's success 2 years ago, who knows? I mean, he could follow up through that this year. So that's why I picked him. And Quincy Newell's, he's the clear-cut number one in New York. So it's always good to have number one wide receivers.
Yeah, and I think by going through that draft, which we did pretty quickly, you can tell overall loading up on running backs is very beneficial. You can find those late-round wide receivers. I know both of us, even though we compete against each other, are going to be looking for running backs early. I mean, that's what we're recommending to everybody because they're not going to last. And once they're gone, they're gone, and people aren't going to be looking to trade them. I mean, they're going to hold on to them for the year. We're going to go ahead and do a 0 RB draft later on in the week. Let you guys see what it looks like, compare the two of them. It is. The rosters look totally different, and it all depends on your preference. If you're in a full PPR league, you may want to load up on wide receivers.
Yeah. That's
where it goes back to knowing your league rules. But yeah, I mean, as you can tell, just from that draft right there, solid overall team. I'd play with that team.
Oh yeah, I was pleased with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be it for today's show. If you guys like the content, make sure you like the channel, subscribe. We'll be going through information like this all year long, dropping new episodes every few days. So be looking out for those. Make sure you find us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. We got our email. Everything's right there on the bottom of the screen. Email us questions. Email us. If there's something you want us to discuss on the show, let us know. We'll make it happen. We'll shout you out on the air. And that's all I got.
And in closing, as always, we want you to win because losing sucks.
That's right. Take it easy, fellas.
Peace.
Later.